part of this presentation that was 2 weeks ago, we analyzed why miners join mining pools, which is basically to reduce the payout variance, and what are the problems with the mining pools, which are essentially the double spend risk, the money custody risk, because the mining pool has for some time custody of miners' money, and also, and I think this is the most important problem, is the centralization perception that essentially reduces the value of the coin, or Bitcoin in this case, which is the one that I use as an example in the whole presentation. So centralized pools suffer many kinds of attacks from rogue miners, but I think the most interesting attack, and maybe the most difficult to tackle, is the block withholding attack. And it's also one of the most studied. There are like 20 papers about this attack. And it doesn't have a simple solution without changing some fundamental parts of Nakamore Consensus, or at least changing some parts of Nakamore Consensus. And also one of the problems with block withholding attack is that the centralized pools cannot defend from this attack. So all the defenses that exist today are based on some actions that the centralized operator of the pool has to perform. So this basically limits the creation of strong decentralized pools. So the second part is about the consensus protocol itself. So first, let's review what's the idea behind Nakamore Consensus. So in Nakamoto Consensus, which is what Bitcoin uses, it relies on a single proof of work condition for three things that essentially are a little bit different. One is Sybil resistance, which is how you deal with two parties that want to submit blocks at the same time. The other one is the reward distribution, which is how are going to distribute the rewards based on the blocks that are submitted, and the other is accounting. So how are you counting the amount of work that each miner has done? So in the case of Bitcoin, the three things are joined into one single thing, which is submitting a block. So if you submit the block, you get the full block reward, and you get a reward that is essentially equal to the work you did for submitting the block. So you have a proof of work, a single proof of work function, which is progress-free. It has no memory. So every hash you perform has equal probability of solving the proof of work puzzle. Okay. So RSK already decouples Sybil resistance with reward distribution with the remask contract. So in RSK, you still have to perform this proof of work to manage to get one block included in the blockchain. But the reward are not paid 100% to the one who submitted the block, but it's paid for all the miners that are able to submit competing blocks for the same block height. So in a way, RSK already decouples the Sybil resistance part with the reward distribution part. So in Nakamore Consensus, the three things are in a way decoupled. So you have Sybil resistance for submitting blocks, and in this sense is exactly equal to Nakamoto Consensus. So there's a block submission difficulty, which is dB sub b. But accounting is performed in a progress-aware fashion. So instead of you being accounted for, the last block you submit, while you work trying to find this block that you will submit, you collect a number of shares, and I already explained in the previous presentation what a share is. So you collect a number of shares, and you will be paid essentially by the number of shares that you show to the blockchain. Okay, so I want to point out that we are in the whole presentation from now on, we won't be talking more about mining pools. So we assume that all miners can directly talk with the blockchain, and they do not need to go through mining pools. Okay, so if I talk about share, it's not about the mining pool share, but a share that is part of the consensus protocol of the blockchain. And so we also decouple reward distribution. And in the case of Nakamore, the reward distribution will be paid 90% according to the number of shares you show to the blockchain, and 10%, or this essentially I'll change this. It's 98% to the cumulative proof of work, and 2% to the miners that manage to submit blocks to the blockchain. So let's take Bitcoin as an example. We will define a period of time we call the epoch, which let's take that it can be 1 day, like 144 blocks in case of Bitcoin, and the reward will be delayed 2 epochs, okay? In the case of Bitcoin, currently the reward is delayed about 2/3 of a block. So just to simplify the presentation, we increase this delay to 2 epochs, to 2 days. So from the revenue collected during the whole epoch, 98% will be given to the miners according to their cumulative work proven with the shares, and 2% will be given to the miners that actually submitted blocks to the blockchain. So if a miner collects shares but do not submit blocks to the blockchain, then he will be penalized by this 2% that he could have got if he had sent the blocks to the blockchain. So how mining is performed? So you keep trying to submit blocks to the blockchain, but while you do this, you collect shares. So there is 2 things going on parallel. First is the accumulation, where you collect shares, and at the same time, if one of the shares happen to have Bitcoin or submission level difficulty, then you manage to submit a block. But when you submit a block, you don't submit only the block. You will submit the block and a proof that you have collected this number of shares. And we will see that this proof is in form of a tree or a challenge response protocol that is based on a Merkle tree. So this is a simplified case, but in the real case, we will have something like the following. So here I presented 2 potential miners, one having 0.7% of the hash rate and the other having 4% of the hash rate. So in epoch 2, here I present 2 epochs. In epoch 2, the miner that has very, very low hash rate will keep accumulating with a very low probability of submitting a block, but eventually, because 0.7% equates to producing 1 block every 144, he managed to create a block. And in this block he creates, which can be during the epoch 2 or even in epoch 3, he will show a proof that he has accumulated the number of shares. Okay, so we give an additional epoch for miners to submit the proof. So the submission can be delayed up to 144 blocks, additional blocks. So as you see, when the epoch 4 begins, then the epoch 2 payout is actually performed. Okay, so you get a payout every epoch, but the payout is delayed by 2 epochs. And in the second case, we have this miner that has 4%, and he produces a much higher number of blocks during an epoch, and each one of these blocks will show a small amount of shares that he certainly created while he was trying to submit the block. Okay, which is why the second miner has segments mostly of share production that are immediately submitted to the blockchain much more often than the first miner. So in the case of Bitcoin, which are these difficulty levels? So the block difficulty level will be the same as the current difficulty level of a Bitcoin block, which is about 30 to multiply by 10 to the power 21. But then the share difficulty, the consensus share difficulty, will be, let's say, 1,000,000 times lower. So if you manage to submit a block to the blockchain, you will have to prove about that you have collected about 1 million shares. And this gives you enough granularity so that if you have many, if you have a mining farm, so you get shares for each one of your mining machines with a 30 once every 30 seconds or so. Okay, depending obviously on the pool size or on the farm size. And the mining pool share, if still miners want to go through mining pools, will always be lower than the consensus share, which is what is required by the blockchain. Okay. So now, how do we prove this cumulative work or cumulative difficulty? First of all, are you still there? Someone says yes.
Yes.
Great. So
Yeah.
the easiest way of proving is well, the easiest because it's the more I would say the one that comes to your mind first is using SNARKS, or more precisely recursive SNARKS. So I'm not an expert on SNARKS, but I just want to say that the SNARK is a succinct proof in space that also happens to be very fast to be checked, that allow you to check that you have performed, that you have executed a certain program, which is have some restrictions, but essentially it's a program with some inputs and with some outputs. And it also allows you to prove that some of these inputs are hidden, but in our case, we don't need to hide anything. We just need the succinctness property of the proof. So for each share you create, you will create also a SNARK proof that proves the following conditions that are listed here in the screen. That the Coinbase address is a specific address, so all shares have the same Coinbase address, meaning that all belong to you. You cannot build a proof that collects shares from other miners. Also, you will prove that the timestamp that is stamped on this share, which is basically a header, a block header, is greater than a certain value X, which was the last time, the timestamp of the last share that you submitted to the blockchain. And also you have to prove that the hash digest, and this is what probably takes more gates on your program, on your circuit, it's proving that the hash of this share, so the block ID of the share, is below the threshold of the difficulty of the share. And what you output is the timestamp and the hash. So the intermediate share, nodes on this tree, the non-leaf nodes, will do a very interesting trick, which is why these are called recursive SNARK, which will validate that the proofs in their children are valid proofs. So they the proofs in this node will validate other proofs for the same proving system. So you see next here what intermediate nodes must validate. They must validate that both childs are valid proofs. They must validate that basically the shares are ordered in timestamp. And in case that they share the same timestamp, which would be strange, but it's still possible if you have a high hash rate, then the shares are ordered by their hash. So you get some lexicographic order on all the shares that you want to prove. The next condition is kind of interesting. You have to prove either that both the left share of the right and the right share the same parent, which means that they are then the best chain has not been updated and you are trying to mine shares for the last block of the best chain, or that the grandparent on the right share is equal to the parent of the left share, which means that the blockchain has advanced one block. So you are now trying to create shares for a block that is, this next to the one that has been just mined. Okay, so you also would like to prove that the shares that you are describing in that node is the sum of the shares of their children, and you want also to highlight which is the last hash, which is the hash of the right child. And if you do all this, you only need to finally prove that basically you have to show the last hash, the last share, show that the parent of the last share is included in the best chain, and By doing so, you actually prove that all shares are part of the best chain. I mean, have parents that are part of the best chain. So you are not allowed to prove shares that belong to another blockchain. For instance, you are not allowed to prove shares that belong to Bitcoin Cash if you are mining Bitcoin because you request this condition. And also, you will be able to prove what is the range of timestamps of the shares, so you don't overlap with the next proof. So every proof must prove a non-overlapping interval of timestamps, so you cannot cheat. Okay, so if you choose the right hashing function that is, that it has a very short circuit in the SNARK, and then you can do these proofs in, like, let's say, a couple of seconds for each terminal node, for each leaf node. So if you create a share every minute and you spend a couple of seconds of CPU time creating the proofs, then you can actually create the tree on the fly. So at any time you want to submit a proof to the blockchain, you are able to. Okay, so this is one way of solving the problem. The downside of using SNARK is that they require the most efficient SNARK require a trusted ceremony, and also the cryptographic technology behind SNARK is kind of new, so it could be broken for some kind of mistake, either in the implementations or in the proofs. So is there another way of proving the same? Well, yes. So to do this other way, we will build a tree, a Merkle tree of the shares, but this is an augmented Merkle tree, which means that there is some information in the middle nodes, which is the range of timestamps that are in the children below, the range of hashes, and you also obviously in the middle nodes specify their left and right hash. Okay. So once we have this tree that can be created on the fly when I collect shares, then I will use a very old kind of proof, which is a challenge response proof on this tree. So essentially, someone will challenge me to uncover one of the shares. So I will commit to the tree root, and so suddenly will challenge, okay, reveal, the share number 1000, and for the share number 1000, I will have to again give the Coinbase address, reveal the header, show that the block timestamp is greater than X, show that the hash digest is below the target, and also I will have to give inclusion proofs to show that this share actually belongs to the Merkle tree in the exact position. And for the intermediate nodes, I have to prove that if it is a left child, then it has to match the start timestamp of the range that is stored on the middle nodes. And if it is a right child, then the same for the end timestamp. And if the start timestamp is equal to the end timestamp, then I have to do the same for the hashes. So I have to check that the left child hash matches the left bounds of the hashes specified in the middle nodes. Okay, so this is basically would be a challenge response protocol. So the question is, how many of these challenges do I require to make sure that the attacker is not cheating, cannot cheat? So first of all, it's very, very easy to cheat for a small number of shares, for a constant number of shares. Let's say I want to prove that I collected 1 million shares, and I add a couple of shares that are fake, like say 10 shares that are fake. So the probability that the challenge uncovers or one of these fake shares is very, very low. So it's very easy to cheat by a very small number of shares. So we have to define a maximum, let's say, cheating factor that we are going to allow. And we can set these factors very, very low, so the incentive for cheating is really irrelevant. Like, let's say 1 in 100,000. So if a mining pool is making 100 grants, $100,000 a day, then he can cheat by $1 a day, and we won't care about that. And essentially, it's no problem. And we also have to assume in one of the protocols that we will see later, what is the attacker's hash rate regarding to the total hash rate of the mining pool. And we are going to use very conservative estimates like 80%, and still the protocol, we get a very, very low number of queries. So we are erring on the safe side here. So the first idea to find this challenger is to turn our interactive protocol into a non-interactive protocol. And to do so, we use a very old trick, which is called the Fiat-Shamir transformation, which is basically that I will commit to a certain tree, and then from this commitment, I will use a hash function to derive a number of queries. So here I show that if I want to prove n shares, then I will derive k queries by hashing over and over, and reducing the hash to the range between 1 and n, and then I derive an index from that. Okay, so I can do this k times and derive k different challenges. 1 minute. Okay. Any question up to here that I should answer before going on?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Going on. So let's take an example. Let's say I want to fake 50% of the shares in the tree. Okay, so here the red circles are all shares that are fake. They don't have the proof of work required to be there, and the blue ones are shares that are honest shares. So what is the success probability of an attacker trying to fake 50% of the share? Well, it's very easy. It's 2 to the minus k, because every challenge just reduced my probability by half to succeed in cheating. Okay, so either the challenge forced me to reveal one of the blue circles or one of the red circles, and the probability for each one is 1/2. So, but there is a kind of a problem with this, is that the attacker obviously can try to brute force and try to create as many commitments as he can, because all he has to do is do this off-chain. So before submitting the block, he tries to find a challenge, a route that he can derive challenges that are favorable to him. And how does he do this? Well, let's say that for some positions on the tree, he swaps 2 shares. Okay, so for timestamp 100, he has 2 candidates which share the same timestamp, and so he swaps one for the other, and also for a couple of shares. So basically, he can do like counting on, by flipping the shares that are included. He can came up with many different commitments very quickly. Okay, so give me 1 minute that I'm hot here. I will take my shirt, my jacket, sorry. Yeah. So every time he wants to create a new commitment, he has to perform the logarithm in base 2 of n number of recomputations, of hash recomputations, until he gets to the root. And also, because he will, on average, derive k divided by 2 hashes until, if he's not successful, then the cost for the attacker to create a commitment it's this value C that is presented there. So when the attack will be profitable? Well, if the average number of hashes required to get paid for these 50% of fake shares and divided by 2 fake shares is lower than the hashes that he would have created if he just continued mining honestly, okay, to mine honestly and divided by 2 shares, if the average number of hashes required by this dishonest behavior is lower, then this attack is profitable. Okay, so it turns out that to deter this attack, to make this unprofitable, one have to choose a K that is about 64 in the example case of Bitcoin. And 64 is not much. Still, the proofs are very short, like a couple of kilobytes. Like this would be, I would say, like maybe 30 kilobytes. It's still very short. But can we do better than this? So let's see. So yes, we can do better than this if we apply to the root of this tree proof of work. Since the miner is constantly doing proof of work, what we can do is build the tree and force that the block that is submitted has a commitment to this tree. And the block that is submitted, which is the yellow block here, it has the difficulty of the block submission difficulty, which is a million times higher. So now creating many versions of this tree becomes a million times harder, because now you will only be able to create very, very few candidate trees in the epoch, okay? So the attack model is that the miner keeps adding shares. This is the best possible attack. The miner keeps adding shares to this tree until he finds a block submission that is favorable, which means that all the queries that are derived from this tree are in the blue circles, point to the blue circles. And this brings down K to about 8. Okay, so this is the proofs are much, much shorter. But it turns out that you can even make this K shorter if you take the account to increase K if the amount of shares that the attacker is willing to prove gets higher. Because if the attacker starts discarding blocks, then he starts collecting more and more shares in the same tree. So we can compensate that by increasing the K as the miner increases the amount of shares that he wants to prove. So by doing so, we get to values of K that are about normally 2 or 3. And in the worst case, they're about 17. Okay, all for Bitcoin. So generally now the proof becomes much, much lower. And the question is, okay, we get a point where the proofs are about a few kilobytes, very, very small. Can we do better than that? Well, yes, we can do better than that. By instead of using this non-interactive version of the proving system, we use the interactive version of the proving system, of the challenge response protocol. But now we derive the challenge, instead of deriving from the same block, we derive it from certain block that comes later. Let's say that we wait for 10 confirmation, and then we take the 11th block and we derive the challenges from that block. So now we have, let's say, 2 big possibilities there. First, that the block is mined by another miner, not the attacker, but just another miner. And in that case, well, if the challenge is unfavorable, then we can make the blockchain force a penalty, which is to remove those shares from any other further attempt to be proven. So the penalty is very high. Basically, you lose all your honest shares. In case of that the hash of this block get you favorable challenges, then of course you manage to run away with 50% more shares, fake shares. But the other big case is, what if you mine the block yourself? Okay, so you are the attacker and you manage to mine this block that you derive your challenges from. So again, we have 2 possibilities. If the challenges are favorable for you, then you get to collect all these reward from the fake shares. But in case that the block is unfavorable for you, then you just throw away the block and hope that either you mine again the block or some other miners mine the block. So this brings to a point where the miner has a lot less control on the challenge. And if you do the computations, and even I don't have the final formulas for computing K, and Nicolas is helping me with this, my estimations is that you need about only 2 challenges with the assumptions of a 80% hashing rate that I said before. So this is very succinct proof. So, okay, I think that's all I had to say about Nakamore. I would just use the rest of the time to explain some other benefits and how Nakamore can be applied to RSK or Bitcoin. So first of all, if you use the SNARK method to prove cumulative difficulty, then mining pools can build their share proofs as the composition of the share proofs that are collected from each individual worker. So essentially, they don't have to redo any of this work. So they become a pass-through of these proofs from the workers to the mining pool, to the blockchain. And at the same time, it reduces a lot of bandwidth required to prove the shares, because currently in mining pools, the miners are constantly sending shares to the pool manager to be rewarded. But using this method, then they just need to send a proof maybe once every 10 minutes. They don't need to send proofs all the time, shares all the time. So the latency and the bandwidth used by mining pools will be a lot reduced. So here I will make a pause because we have survey time. So I don't know if I have 5 more minutes or maybe 10 more minutes of discussion, but this is a good time for you to fill your survey. So Julian, let's say we wait 4 minutes, 3 minutes for that.
Yeah, sure.
Great.
It's a short survey.
Okay. So if anyone has...
Can you send the link in the comments, please?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Ivan.
Oh, it's already sent. Great. So anyone wants to take this time for a question?
Serge, I have a question.
Yes.
Is this latest benefit that you just mentioned something that would impact in the merge mining? Because one of the benefits was that they are talking to the miners all the time for Decor.
I'm not quite sure I've understood, but this if
Bitcoin... So if they are doing merge mining,
yes,
they will need to talk very often to the RSK mining side, but they won't need to talk that often on the Bitcoin side. So
I think that if this would be implemented in Bitcoin, let's say, and not in RSK, yes, of course, that will be disadvantages for the miners because they will still need to receive the shares for RSK. So if this potentially, let's say, is implemented in Bitcoin as a soft fork, then we should in RSK implement it also. Okay, so we reduce the stress on mining pools, but maybe we just decentralize mining altogether. Okay, so yes. Okay,
thanks.
so I will continue. So what are the problems? Well, these are not actually problems, but more than things that have to be tweaked or parameterized. So the first one is the best. How do we choose the best chain rule? So the easiest way is to choose the chain with the highest cumulative proof of work, cumulative work, not the one that has the highest number of blocks, because these are things that are decoupled in a way, but the one that has the highest number of shares proven. But in these two cases, we have two chains that have fork, and one has accumulated some shares that are very recent, and the second one, while the first one has accumulated some shares that are not recent, that are kind of old. Both of them has the same amount of cumulative proof of work, cumulative work, but which of these two should I choose? And that is something that I haven't figured out yet. But I think that it's almost the same, but I have to think more about this. So the other thing that has to be very important is to have this the cumulative work must match the block rate. Okay, so the amount of work that you see if you add up all the blocks that have been submitted should match the amount of work you see if you add up all the shares that have been submitted. Why? Because there is an incentive for people to submit blocks, for miners to submit blocks. But if for any reason these things become decoupled, like there is no relation between them, like miners withholding blocks from some reason, then this could be a problem, okay? Because then the blockchain difficulty adjustment algorithm may not adjust correctly depending on the hash rate. So this is something to think about. And the other interesting thing is with this method, then any miner that is able to submit a single block in an epoch, or in the case of Bitcoin, in 144 blocks, get the chance to mine without the mining pool. But what about the rest? So 1 in 144 is 0.07%. So any mining pool having 0.7% of Bitcoin hash rate does not need a mining pool, okay? But what about the ones that have less, like 0.1%? Well, it turns out that they can also participate. They only have to send their proof in a transaction instead of trying to, while they are trying to get a block included in the blockchain, they still, if they are approaching the epoch limit, they can just send this same proof in a transaction. And if we put enough fees in this transaction, or if we make the system pay the miner that includes this transaction a little bit more, then the incentives are right, then basically they will be paid by the amount of work, even if they just collected a few shares in an epoch, okay? So it turns out that this can work for any miner. So there is a penalty. They don't get the submission reward, which is about, as we said, 2%. But at the same time, joining a pool always costs 2%, so or 1%. So we can match these percentages. So there is no incentive to join a mining pool because the mining pool itself will keep some percentage of the reward. So basically, it would be the same for them. So can we implement Nakamore in RSK? Yes, there is a couple of benefits, like no more uncle block propagation, and that reduces bandwidth usage. Like I would say, like about 25%. And it also simplifies a lot of things because uncles have some validating uncles take some time, so you don't have to validate uncles, and that you save about 10% of block processing time. But the downside is that verifying cumulative work in the HSM 2.0 gets a little bit more complicated. It's not impossible, but just a little more complicated. So can we implement Nakamore in Bitcoin? Yes, and it's very interesting that you can do it in a soft fork. You don't need to do a hard fork to do this. So essentially, all miner payments goes to a shared account that initially is obviously anyone can spend output. So, but these UTXOs are protected by the soft fork rules, so nobody can touch these UTXOs. They are special, and when the epoch is over, then the miner of the following block is forced to include a transaction that consumes these shared account funds and distribute them according to the miners, according to the distribution function, which is very, very similar to what Remask does. So basically, it's just moving something like Remask to Bitcoin, okay? And that can be done in a soft fork way. The Coinbase maturity, I would say to increase it to 2 days instead of 2/3 of a day, but this is not very important. And we keep the same difficulty adjustment algorithm, and this is okay as long as we can make sure that the block rate follows the cumulative proof of work. So that these two things are always, equal. And the benefits are very clear. I mean, we get Bitcoin to be 100% decentralized again, no mining pools at all, okay? And the overhead is very, very little, like a couple of kilobytes per block. So I think there's no drawback of doing this. Unless, of course, this protocol has some flaw. It could have been the case. I mean, it could be the case. But if this protocol works as I think it works, then there is no downside. So later I will share the presentation. So I wrote here some bibliography for you to read if you want. And so for the summary, so miners join mining pools to reduce variance, but centralization in mining pools is very problematic, as we discussed. Existing decentralized mining pool solutions, all of them fall to block withholding tax. So I think that's the main reason they have not been successful. And Nakamore Consensus has many benefits, like eliminates the need for the miners to form mining pools at all, if they are doing this to reduce the payout variance. It enables decentralized pools resistance to this attack, and it protects centralized pools from this attack also. And as a corollary, as a side effect, it reduces the bandwidth utilization for all pools in case they use the SNARK version of this proof. Okay, so that's all on time. Hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions, I'm open to.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Sergio.
Thanks, Gabriel. I hope that if there are no questions, it's because it was you are astonished and not because it was too hard.
I do have one, Sergio.
Yes, please.
So, but it's more regarding the next steps of this. I mean, so what are we planning to do with it? I mean, are we planning to change our consensus algorithm?
Okay, so this is not something that that will be decided or in a couple of days. The next steps are producing a quality paper, which is at this time we have a 20-page draft of this paper to distribute in the community, to get community feedback, and then we can discuss if this is something that we want to pursue. I think that everyone should be part of this discussion, like all the community behind RSK. I would really love this to be implemented in Bitcoin together with RSK or before being implemented in RSK, because I think that if we implemented this in RSK, then it's only a minor improvement, but pools will still exist because the Bitcoin is what is driving mining pools. So I think that next step would be to, if this works, to push this in Bitcoin first.
Okay. So and how do you think this will be received by the mining pools? Because basically we're saying, hey guys, you're not going to be part of the business anymore.
I think it's a question, interesting question. I think that because this protocol also protects them, and I think that because there is no a single reason why miners join mining pools. There are some other reasons that are not related to variance, payout variance. So they might receive this as a good thing, even if this allows many miners to not join mining pools.
Serge, one
Yes.
question. And if mining pools don't exist anymore, where would you do the merge mining? Then every single miner will have to implement the merge mining protocol?
Yes, and that's a good reason why some miners will still join mining pools. Maybe they don't want to run their own RSK nodes, or maybe disincentivize miners to run their own RSK nodes. So this is something that we should discuss.
Yeah, maybe maybe we can present it in a way that mining pools will still be needed, but in order to benefit from universal merge mining and other side chains, and contributing to the decentralization.
You can still join. You can still join a mining pool and trust the mining pool to give you the RSK block. So essentially, you can keep the mining pool operation for giving you the universal merge mining and RSK blocks or block hashes and mine Bitcoin in a completely decentralized way. Okay, so the mining pool has two functions. One is producing the block templates, and the other is reducing block buyout. So you can still keep the part that produces the block templates, but decentralize the part that distributes the buyouts.
Very interesting. I'm sure whenever that article or blog post is put together, it will create a lot of conversations and interest in the space, and it will position RSK and Reef within the Bitcoin community discussions. No, so it's also very good that.
Yeah, I think that the paper has to undergo obviously peer review, internal review, peer review. So, but if this goes as expected, yes, I think it's a very interesting improvement to share with the community.
Yes, I think so, but at the same time, I think that we must be careful with. I mean, it's not good for us that mining pools get mad with us.
Yeah, totally. I discussed this with other people in the organization. Anything we do will be done in a way that to highlight the benefits for mining pool, maybe before highlight, that this could bypass mining pool. So it's all about the way we present it, but essentially there are benefits both for mining pools and for solo miners.
Okay, yeah, if we can put it in a way and in that way, and it's clear, yeah, I think that is great. But yeah, I just need to take that from the mining side here.
Yes, totally.
Thanks, sir.
Okay. If there are no more questions, then okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Julian, for
thank you.
The opportunity. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.